Chapter 15. Tenchi's Melancholy. Seina, who finished lunch at Tsukiko's house, headed for Tenchi's house with Fuku. Seina heard that Tenchi was going out to the field from Sasami, and so he headed for the field to see him. Tenchi-senpai, are you working the fields alone today? Maya. Ryooki raised her hand as if Seina was taking attendance. Oh, that's right. Aren't there usually 2 people helping you? Thanks to everyone's help yesterday, they can relax for a while. Tenchi said, but he didn't stop working the fields. However, he occasionally let out a sigh. Senpai, what's wrong? Seina noticed the situation and asked Tenchi. Oh, no, it's nothing. It feels pretty strange to have nothing to do. You planted carrots as far as the eye could see yesterday. It usually takes quite a while for us to do it on our own. So, what did you talk to Aunt Tsukiko about yesterday? What? Nothing, why? Aunt Tsukiko seemed a little off when I saw her. Something was wrong. She seemed to be upset. Oh, Kai told me that Dai came home. Even though he was talking to Tenchi, it was still hard for Seina to talk about Tsukiko. Oh, that's right. Dai was there earlier. Has anyone in the village ever told you anything about Dai-san? Like how he and Tsukiko got together? Seina didn't know a lot about Tsukiko's past. The most he had learned about her past was that she was friends with Mickey's father at the academy a long time ago. Hey, come on. You can tell me. Well, whenever Kai used to ask her about him, she would always take off her shoe and start beating him with it and tell him not to bring up such things. It was a little worrisome, to be honest. But if Kai goes to space, contact with Dai will be inevitable. Maybe Dai was there to get familiar with Kai in case that happened. Oh, that makes sense, Hayam. Seina. I know something, but if anyone asks, you didn't hear it from me, okay? Of course. I'll never tell anyone. Well, I don't know all the details, but after Kuriko's father, Tsukiko's husband, passed away, she met Mr. Dai, but at that time it seems that he wasn't such a weird person. He was more serious, a normal person. Ha ha ha. Senpai, are you sure about that? Seina rarely suspected the things Tenchi said of being lies. When I heard that, I said the same thing. But if that wasn't true, how else would you explain things with them? They're not married, but they had Kai. At the time it must have seemed like a reasonable relationship. Well, maybe he cheated on her, or maybe he forced himself on her, but Dai-san is not the type to cheat. Neither is he a person who would do an abominable thing like that, and Tsukiko could easily beat the crap out of him if he even tried. If he had done something like that, I doubt Mr. Dai would ever be allowed to see Kai. On the contrary, if he did such a thing, Tsukiko would probably have murdered him, or at the very least he'd be in jail. And Tsukiko was not the type to get drunk and have sex with strangers either, so that probably wasn't it. At that time Dai-san was having a lot of private troubles. He seems to have been terribly troubled, and from what I've heard he was pretty neurotic and suicidal. In other words, you think their relationship is troubled because he's crazy now? Well, more like I think he was a serious young man who was kind to Tsukiko when she was going through a difficult time. That's the best guess I can come up with. Sounds plausible, right? It's not too big of a stretch, but you might be cutting it a bit too close. If a young man who was once serious and quiet becomes neurotic and crazy the next day, it made sense that he would seem like a cute kitten turned into a cockroach to Tsukiko. The people who told me that seemed to think that he was faking it. Whatever happened, Tsukiko must have liked him at one time because he is Kai's father. It's hard for any of them to accept that fact, though. That sounds absolutely impossible. Seina always thought that Tsukiko and Dai never made any sense, and Kai agreed. Maybe she was possessed at the time? Kai used to say. Speaking of Dai, Seina, do you know about the Tenan family? Yes, of course I know. I heard Dai-san is from that family. Wow, I believe it. The Tenans were always treated specially. They were a family that treated the law like a joke. I hear they're pretty famous. My teacher at the academy is a member of the Tenan family. I didn't realize they were so famous. I should ask Amain. On second thought. I better not. She might get angry. Yeah, as I understand it, Dai is pretty much just like one would expect of the other tenants. Oh, I see. Thank you very much for that information, senpai. Up to that point, Sena had never encountered Dai in space. But he didn't know what would happen in the future. If Kai went into space, the chances would be much higher. He didn't dislike Dai, but honestly, he just wanted to avoid having any contact beyond what was necessary with the Tenan family. Sirio alone was troublesome enough. He didn't want to have to deal with anyone else cut from the same cloth. Maya. At that time, Ryooki, who found Sasami with Fuku, raised her hands and she ran to hug them. Well, I know we didn't do much, but let's call it a day. Tenchi put his hoe on the ground and walked off. Tenchi and Sena finished bathing after finishing dinner. They left Fuku with Ryooki and Sasami and headed to Tenchi's room on the 3rd floor. It was too early to go to bed yet, but they laid down a futon and relaxed in some comfortable sleepwear. Tenchi-senpai, wasn't there something you wanted to talk about? Sena broke the silence between them and a conversation between the two started. Well, yeah. Tenchi turned his face down and looked puzzled. He seemed to be lost as to whether or not to talk. It sounds hard to say. Maybe it's about me. Why do you think that? Sena was good at reading people with this sort of thing. Tenchi-senpai, you have the same look on your face as when Aunt Kion passed away. You look sad and it looks to me like you're suffering. Okay, I have such a face. Tenchi lifted his eyes and looked up at Sena's face. He made a calm, yet resolute expression. Tenchi had made up his mind to tell Sena. Well then, do you have a moment to listen? Sena quietly nodded. This seemed like a heavy thing to talk about. Sena was ready to accept it. Tokimi, are you there? Tenchi spoke out loud to nowhere in particular, as if he was delivering a soliloquy. A girl like a small doll appeared floating in front of Sena's eyes. I exist in all dimensions, space, and time. Have you forgotten? Tenchi Masaki? What is that? Sena wasn't that surprised by things like this anymore. Although this seemed to be more of a strange entity rather than a broadcasted image. Either way, he was rather confused by the figure that didn't fit with the serious tone Tenchi was using. Actually, she is. Oh wait, Tenchi Masaki. Before I talk about this kind of thing, I need to create a suitable stage. Tokimi silenced Tenchi. She raised her hand up high and suddenly, the universe spread out under Sena's feet. It covered the whole room in a blink of an eye. Due to his bioenhancement, Sena had a strong resistance to hypnosis and drugs. His senses told him that this was not a hallucination. No, it was something else. This is real. Sena's finely honed instincts shouted. His sense for danger judged the situation as abnormal. All right, here we go. Do you perceive this as real? He heard Tokimi's voice, but it was not the voice of a child like earlier. It was the voice of a mature adult. Moreover, the sound rippled through all of space. He couldn't identify the source of the sound. But when he looked up, hey, Tokimi appeared as an adult of infinite size. She looked down at Sena gracefully. It was as if she covered the whole of space above him. The things he felt were not easy feelings to describe, such as fear or despair. It was more like the instinctual feeling of awe from seeing a true god. Whoa, Sena stopped. He felt his consciousness trying to be swallowed into the abyss and swallowed the scream that he was about to let loose. Sweat spurted from his whole body. He was exhausted from just looking closely at Tokimi's appearance. Sena breathed heavily and slowly regained his composure. Oh, I got sweaty again. I'm going to have to take a bath again. Sena, who for some reason noticed himself thinking such a stupid thing, had become unencumbered by his overwhelmed feelings in that moment. Oh, I see. Tokimi looked at Sena and smiled satisfactorily. Tenchi Masaki. Tell him everything. This guy has a spirit that is strong enough to handle it. Before we do that, can you explain this situation? For now, he seemed to be in outer space. However, the sense of scale was too large for it to be that. Oh, Sena Yamada, I know what you are thinking. You are just outside of the three-dimensional universe you live in. Here's your galaxy. What? A galaxy about 30 centimeters in size was floating in front of Sena. Wow! Sena stiffened up so he wouldn't touch it on accident. He stopped breathing so he didn't accidentally move. The atoms that make you up won't affect the various stars of the galaxy. Well, even if you say that The galaxy suddenly moved away from Sena, or rather Sena moved from where it was, But in the distance, the large galaxy remained shining like a bubble. If this was really the universe at that moment, how many billion light years would he have just been moved? I thought it would be easier to show you by contrasting you with an existing object. To help show how large the existence that is Tenchi Masaki is compared to the size of all the rest of existence. Existence? Size? To him it would look like this. Tokimi said. Seina then saw Tenchi. Seina, what did you think of me when we competed to run up to the shrine? Oh, that. I figured you also had undergone bioenhancement. Do you know what this is? 3 thin film-like objects appeared before Tenchi. Are those what I think they are? Have you ever heard of light hawk wings? The ones that the royal ships create? Is that what you are? How is Tenchi-senpai creating them? In front of Seina's eyes, Tenchi transformed them into a sword, a shield, and armor. Material transformation of the light hawk wings. Besides Tenchi Masaki, we are the only ones who can do that. It is impossible even for the first generation of royal trees. Somehow, when we came into existence, the meaning of our existence was understood. Seina looked up at Tokimi. Behind her he saw what looked like 2 people's shadows. He was concerned about what they were, but felt he should listen first. Who the hell is Tokimi? Is Tenchi-senpai doing this because of you? Yes, we are called the 3 top gods of creation. As our name suggests, we are the ones located at the top of every dimension that exists. Top gods. Top gods is just a mere name. They have the power of omniscience, but they are just high-level living organisms. There is no need to worship them or give them a title such as God. Oh, is that so? He didn't know to deal with having an omniscient creature in front of him. He decided not to think about it any deeper. Can you see something like a figure behind me? It would be better for you to explain why Tenchi has become such a presence. Before I talk about this kind of thing, I need to create a suitable stage. Oh! At that time, Seina understood the meaning of the word Tokimi said. Oh, I see. Before this I couldn't believe that Tokimi was anything like that, or even Tenchi-senpai. If he had heard this from Tenchi's mouth in his room with a small doll telling him this, he wouldn't have believed him. So that's why they're showing it to me this way. He wiped a large amount of sweat dripping down his face with his hand, and wiped it on the hem of his sleepwear. As our name suggests, there are 3 of us at the top of the universe. One of us is the one you know as Washu Hakubi, the other is known as the founder of the royal trees, Tsunami. We 3 were the only things that existed here originally. I understand the founder of the imperial trees being one of you, but you're saying Washu is also something like God? Her power as a god remains here in the shadow behind me. Although a little power came with her and exists in the 3rd dimension. Why did we do such a thing? Well, that's why we exist. Why you exist? What is your purpose? From the moment we existed, we had the power of omnipotence, but at the same time there was a contradiction. It was traumatically upsetting. We knew there was a further dimension above the top dimension in which we exist. But our omniscience was denying proof of the existence of that dimension. It both existed and was impossible to exist. That caused you to be traumatically upset? But why did such a thing happen? We tried to investigate it. We spent an infinite amount of time in trial and error, what Sister Washa calls the thinker's way of thinking. But we could not find the failure in our omniscience and omnipotence. So I tried again and again, through endless hours of trial and error, but the result was the same. This story is hard for me to take in. When everything looks like I'm drunk. Seina could not keep up with the sense of scale. He felt suddenly like he stood on top of a tower without a safety harness. We created a subdimension and set a breakaway line from the top dimension. The story is very similar to the stories that appear in many religions. Originally, those born there lacked most abilities. However, if someone could break through it and reach the top dimension. So, you created reality to find a clue to the top dimension? Yes, but when we did that there was an unprecedented change in us. Although we were originally a trinity, our sister Washu let go of her power and memory as a top god and went to live there as a human being. She began seeking knowledge from the beginning to see if there really was a contradiction. My sister Tsunami entered the 3rd dimension with as much power as possible and searched for new possibilities through the inheritance of her blood. And as we originally planned at the beginning of the experiment, I set out to disrupt the normal harmony of the dimension. I caused irregularities to look for a possibility. The result was Tenchi-senpai? No. There was another person, Z. What happened to him? He lost his life in pursuit of the answer. He did not want to let us experiment with those who possessed the same potential as himself. He hoped to be the only absolute one. He fought against Tenchi Masaki but was killed. And in the original timeline of those fights, Tenchi Masaki's presence started to emerge. Do you still remember when you were slashed by Z, Tenchi Masaki? Oh! Yeah. I remember I died trying to protect Ryoko. But after that, when I died, I only remember being spoken to by someone. Tenchi explored his memory to desperately remember that time. But he could not remember anything but the intense pain he felt at that time. He was thrown into the upper dimension by being slashed in half by Z. He transformed the substance of light hawk wings and formed a body from something like a cell and began to emerge as an existence into the next dimension. His emergence, which should have occurred as a result of spiritual maturation, happened by force, so we had to suppress Tenchi's emergence with all our power, which was the cause of his pain. The heavy pressure that came out of him could have destroyed the universe. So, it's dangerous if he doesn't mentally mature? Seina Yamada, what do you think of this situation? What did you think when you saw me in this figure? No, I understand. Seina remembered his feeling of having goosebumps all over his body. Even remembering it caused a cold sweat throughout his body. Tenchi distorted his expression as well as Seina. I am now synchronized with the memories of Seina Yamada, so you will have some sense of what it feels like to reach a higher dimension. Well, yes, certainly. But why do I remember talking to someone after that? Our experiments produce a lot of distortion, and as a result, there is a singularity in the form of a person to balance those reactions. She is the mother of Ms. Tsunami's three-dimensional body, Sasami. Although she is stable now, after 100,000 years, she suddenly loses the balance in her spirit and starts to go out of control. Ms. Masaki. After 100,000 years? Seina and Tenchi raised their voices at the same time. You exist in every dimension, every time axis, but Masaki going out of control after 100,000 years is only one possibility. Senpai, do you understand what she means by that? Don't ask me. Even if they recognized the timescale, it was too big. Their thoughts couldn't get beyond thinking about it. The future is determined by the choices and behaviors both conscious and unconscious of many creatures' existences. Because of that, the time axis of the future is chaotic with many possibilities undetermined. To put it in an easy-to-understand way, it is like Kai Masaki's adult choose-your-route type adventure game. What the heck? Seina and Tenchi seem to be pulled out of their immersion. For something that is a big deal, it's kind of disgusting that an omniscient god is describing it using hentai games as an example. Seina Yamada. I am merely choosing the best way to communicate this information. Tokimi was omniscient any way you put it. It wasn't like she usually had to explain things to people or vice versa. In other words, the endings change depending on our choices, but there are other endings in the game. Is that what it's like? Misaki from hundreds of thousands of years felt hostility towards us and attacked Tenchi Masaki, who was there at the same time on the same time axis. He came to stop her. That is the one who helped the present timeline's Tenchi Masaki make it through the emergence. So, that's why. Tenchi-senpai, 100,000 years later, helped Tenchi-senpai now. That Tenchi Masaki was only a possibility though because that part of the future had not yet been confirmed. There was also a temporary phenomenon that occurred where he first jumped to the point and time on the axis with Noik when she was still the female half of Kagato like she was originally. So, in the end, the emergence was actually stopped by the current Tenchi-senpai? Yes, and now his growth continues. What happened to the man named Z? That man lost to Tenchi Masaki, and his possibility disappeared. So, I restored him and the ones of his I was holding to live his life. As an ordinary human being, now he lives at his home with his parents. Tokimi, when talking about that, was sad about something. Seina wondered whether he could keep on talking, but he decided his questions were answered for now. Why did you do that? What if he comes back again to attack? He cannot use his power anymore, because we cannot recreate people's possibilities when we reincarnate them, so in a way he was rushing our experiment. So, now that you know that Tenchi Masaki, do you hate us? Huh. Tokimi's words were surprising. Seina looked at Tenchi, who was silent and depressed. All of the causes of your suffering are because of us. But it's more than that. More than that. I also blame my heart's weakness. He was going to. Ryoko. And so I. And so I. The face of Tenchi distorted in pain at Tokimi's words. I'm sorry I have drawn you into this infinite prison. Infinite prison. Isn't that a bit of a rough way to put it? What if he likes it? Seina's voice was calm. After this ability appeared, I had a physical examination done by Washu. She couldn't see any physical abnormality or change. But my body is no longer aging. But if you don't age, you won't die, right? Your true existence is already extraordinarily large at this stage. It's larger than the galaxy, so that doesn't surprise me, but he's immature, not immortal. Seina Yamada. It is possible to kill him if he is destroyed at his existing size. So, and who's able to do that? You're not able to do that, so isn't it almost as good as immortality? It was hard to imagine a person destroying something that was the size of millions of light years in scale. There are some high-dimensional creatures in Zara that can, so can a first-generation royal tree and Seina's Yamada Kamadic. And something which Seina Yamada could potentially take control of in the future could also do it. However, we are not allowed to carry out any act that would end up harming Tenchi Masaki. Then, isn't that immortality? It was impossible for someone to do things that the omniscient shoguns of the universe wouldn't allow. Seina, you don't know the seriousness of this. You two no longer age because of me. Tenchi said in an upset voice that was very unusual for Seina to hear. Me too. Sorry, I'm trying to be as calm as you about this. But let's talk about it later. No, I must. I have to talk about it now. Tenchi breathed deeply and slowly to help settle his nerves. Even Tokimi and her sisters, who are top gods, seem to be experiencing a slight deterioration. Even when this universe is dead and gone, I will keep living forever. Even when Tokimi is gone. Even if all things around me are gone, I will stay here forever. If he existed in the absence of anything, what kind of condition would he be in? Tenchi had only fear of this thing which he couldn't understand. Is that what you mean by an infinite prison? What did you think, Seina, when you heard about bioenhancement? What did you think about having a lifespan of 2,000 years? I certainly thought that I was different from other Earthlings already. But in space it was commonplace. Everyone around me had it. So, it really no longer mattered when I remembered that. I am also like that, but I'm doomed to this infinite prison. If I wasn't alone, I'd probably feel that way too, but I'm not. There's no way. No way? Why? My power is preventing everyone close to me from aging. Ryoko, Aika, Sasami and Noik, Mihoshi, Ryoki, Washa-chan and you too, Seina. Tenchi said as he squeezed the words out with a trembling voice. Tenchi-senpai's power is making me not age? Although I don't want to apologize for doing what I did, I have no choice but to say I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. It was a painful confession. It was the heaviest confession in the world. Infinite? Oh yeah, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Seina, what are you saying? Tenchi could not hide his surprise at Seina's reaction. No, he could not understand. An infinite prison. If I hadn't met Kariko-san or you, Tenchi-senpai, I think that's where I would have been. Of course, it wouldn't have been really infinite, but I understand your feelings, Tenchi-senpai. I've felt the fear of being alone forever and the feeling of wanting someone to help me. So, I would like to go with you into infinity together, like you did for me, senpai. Seina looked straight ahead as he said this to Tenchi with a heavy tone. Seina, your feelings towards this are terribly pleasing. But even Tokimi's power is unable to help me escape from this prison. Tenchi desperately wanted to leave things as they were. Tenchi was happy, but he was crying in his mind. Even if that's the case, I am not planning to kill the possibility of him being born as a higher entity, neither are my sisters. Washu and Tsunami, if it's awful, then that's how it shall have to be. I do not mind being hurt. I can't resist it. I can't do it. They had lived an infinite time with Tokimi solely to create this possibility. Tenchi, who defeated Z and saw Tokimi's bitterness when Z lost to him, didn't feel like blaming her. Then let's go. Let's go to the endless infinity. Seina said quickly. Seina Yamada, your heart is strong. I'm sure you could easily endure living in infinite time. Don't worry, Tenchi. There is hope at the end of infinity. Hope? Tenchi Masaki, when we gathered for the first time at the Masaki family home, do you remember what Ryoko said? What if Tokimi's existence was an experiment of the people in a higher dimension? An existence even higher? That's doing the same experiment as Tokimi's experiment. Because there was a contradiction shared between us, that possibility cannot be denied. However, that conclusion was not the one that Tokimi was able to accept on its own. Their omniscience was also denying it. However, it was the encounter with the other Tenchi that left her flexible enough to say that it was a possibility. If we are experiments of those in the upper dimension, Tenchi Masaki may be a natural-born person there. Although, of course, it may just be more of the same thing. But, at the very least, it would be solved from our perspective. That is the only way a possibility disappearance would be allowed. Tokimi's purpose was to create an existence that went above the top dimension. If Tenchi reached there, Tokimi's role would end. It would be no longer necessary to protect Tenchi. Beyond the limit of infinity. That seems terribly frightening. Tokimi, you've had an infinite time to live. What kind of feeling is it to live in infinity? Seina was fairly cheerful as he asked Tokimi. It passes like a quick moment. I kind of got that impression. For a bug who is born in the morning and dies in the evening, Seina's life is almost infinite from perspective. The bug doesn't recognize his life as short, so if one lived indefinitely, Seina didn't think they would see it as that long. Because you have such a short life, I hear that people live quite hard before their death, so what does that feel like? Some choose to live for a short time because they are vain, or lazy, or are content with living a short life. There are people who find their life meaningful and want to live forever. The main thing that changes how you see it is your own will to go on. From my perspective, Tenchi, there is no need to be afraid of an infinite world, but there are people who are always beside me. So I don't think I am qualified to say that to you. Seina, are you really okay? Are you okay with going to the end of infinity with me? Tenchi asked Seina with a shiver. He was prepared to accept Seina's answer. Yes, of course. I am a bit excited actually. Excited? To be able to see the end of the universe. It seems like a dream to be able to go anywhere. Of course, even though Seina was absolutely confident, Tenchi didn't know what would happen if it actually came to that time, but at least there was no more anxiety in his mind for now. You sure are strong. Thanks to you, Tenchi-senpai. If you say so. Tenchi closed his eyes, accepted everything and smiled. Mia. Tenchi was suddenly brought back to reality by Ryoki and Fuku's meows. The outer space that was supposed to be there had disappeared, and they had returned to Tenchi's room. Ryoki? Fuku-chan. Ryoki went to Tenchi and Fuku went to Seina. Both of us wanted to give Tenchi-chan and Seina-chan a break. Sasami-chan. Washa-chan. At the entrance of Tenchi's room, Sasami and Washi, who they had seen behind Tokimi just moments earlier, were standing there watching them with a smile. Washu confirmed that Tenchi recognized her as herself. She gently raised her hand and greeted him, then she went downstairs quickly and gently. Mia. A smile came naturally to the faces of Tenchi and Seina as they looked at Ryoki and Fuku. Good night. Tenchi and Seina said to their partners. Ryoki and Fuku moved satisfactorily towards Sasami, jumped to stand on both of her shoulders. Before they knew it, Chibi Tokimi was sitting on top of Sasami's head. Good night, Tenchi Oni-chan, Seina Oni-chan. Sasami left the room with a bounce in her step. Thank you, Sasami-chan. Tenchi called to Sasami. She turned back to him. To say thank you is my job. Sasami laughed to herself and then she went down the stairs making light footsteps.